Plenty on the go on this first day of the three-day summit. The president himself meant to deliver that keynote address, according to this program I have, around 3 o'clock this afternoon. What's happening in the run-up to that opening of the summit?
Well, as you can see behind me here, people have started gathering in this hall. It's mostly local and international media from primarily the BRICS countries that are represented here today. And then on the big screens behind us here, you'll see that there's a little bit of a presentation going on, and it's discussions with various panel members, specifically discussing trade and how trade can not only be improved among BRIC nations, but also having a look at the opportunities and challenges that lay ahead in terms of the fourth industrial revolution. So we are at a building up stage and having a look at how things are going to be in the decades to come, and how perhaps the BRICS relationship could shape trade on not only the African continent, but indeed the world. But all eyes will be on Rob Davies, the Trade and Industry Minister, when he kicks things off officially at 3 p.m. this afternoon. There was a little bit of confusion earlier on. The Heads of State address is happening tomorrow morning from about 11:15, with Cyril Ramaphosa leading that alongside his counterparts from China, India, Russia and Brazil. However, we will hear from the President of the Republic very briefly this afternoon during these trade discussions and the official opening by Trade and Industry Minister Rob Davies. So it's a question of wait and see on exactly what we are going to get when this officially gets underway. But the 10 BRICS summit is in full swing almost here at the Sandton Convention Centre in Johannesburg. And my oh my, Michelle, let's just cast our minds back. The last time we hosted the BRICS conference was in 2013, and what a different country South Africa was back then, and indeed also what a different world we were living in. Global trade remains the cornerstone of any international relationship, and perhaps there might be new paths charted moving forward, especially in the era of Donald Trump and global protectionism. Michelle.
Now, Nick, the summit is yet to kick off officially, but already we've seen billions of rand worth of agreements being signed. Just yesterday, that announcement by Chinese President Xi Jinping of that $14.7 billion investment into South Africa's economy. You were speaking to Peter Fabricius just a little earlier, and it's not money in hand just yet. We're still talking about promises at this stage.
Indeed. I mean, it's one thing saying that I'll give you 100 rand or whatever it is, but it's a different thing entirely if you take out your wallet and take out a crisp 100 rand note and slide it across the table. A lot of people are thinking that that's exactly what happened when Cyril Ramaphosa visited the Middle East, visited Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and came back with investment promises of $20 billion. And a lot of people are also thinking that's exactly what happened yesterday. It's as though Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, arrived with a big wad of cash and pumped $14 billion into the South African economy. No, it's an indication of intent, Michelle, and it's up to the observers, economists, and of course the media here in South Africa and other trade partner countries that we're entering into deals with, to ensure that these promises are actually kept. It's one thing to say that you are going to stump up the money for all sorts of different things, like the Middle East investments were centered around renewable energy, and there's going to be all sorts of loans to state-owned enterprises like Eskom and Transnet in the Chinese deal. But when is it actually going to happen? When are we going to see these promises being pushed into action? And once again, we must remind ourselves that it's not a question of an EFT, so to speak. It's a question of putting money forward for the building of factories, putting money forward to float Eskom's liquidity. That's when we can actually see these investment promises being made good on. It's not just a question of pleasant platitudes and lip service when it comes to global trade. You actually need to look at the bottom line, Michelle.
And Nick, important to point out, and it's also been a discussion point around China's investment into South Africa's economy. It's not out of the goodness of China's heart that this investment is taking place. What does China get in return?
Well, indeed, this is exactly what a lot of foreign policy analysts, economists, and otherwise are looking into. It's one thing to say that you are going to be putting money into an economy, but what are you going to be getting out? And is this going to be an equal relationship as well? There are a couple of questions to be asked as to whether or not South Africa deserves its seat at the BRICS table, no longer being the largest economy in Africa. It won the seat at the table way back, if memory serves correct, in 2009 on the eve of Christmas when President Jacob Zuma was still in charge. And many wondered why perhaps Africa's most advanced economy was going to be used as a conduit for investment by these other big players in the BRIC grouping, as it were then, to continue the march into Africa by other foreign powers besides the erstwhile colonial rulers of the past 2 centuries. So we know for a fact, it's no secret that China has in a big way set its sights on Africa in terms of investment and in terms of rolling out infrastructure so that they can create markets back home for the minerals that are extracted from African soil, and then also in turn provide markets for Chinese goods into these countries whereby a lot of raw materials are being extracted. So we need to be very, very alive to the fact that there's no such thing as a free lunch, especially when it comes to global trade, Michelle. So it's very, very good to have countries and companies that are, big global corporates that are, in many ways, represent these countries that are promising all of this money. But we need to ensure that there is a balanced relationship in that business agreement, that it's not just a case of South Africa opening up the doors and allowing this free-for-all, as we have seen in many international global agreements, not only from BRIC countries, but also, let's just be honest, other big global players like the EU and America as well.
All right, well, thanks very much for that update from the Sandton Convention Centre. Niklaus Bauer is our reporter tracking the story as the 10th edition of the annual BRICS Summit is set to kick off this afternoon.